What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another rousing Monday market update. And boy, do we have an exciting show in store for you. I am your host, Sean Grapevine, here in the Atlanta studios of the Monday market update. And excited to be with you, talk about what happened last week, what's happening today, what's in your future, and how to deal with it. I am joined today, as with most Mondays, by a man who needs no introduction, but will get one anyway. He's the Mac of the rate stack. He had BIPs for breakfast. He does best efforts with no efforts. He's the Lord of the Locks, Sultan of SLAs, the King of collateralized debt. He's the Colossus of credit. The King. Oh my gosh, I have my list. It's like it's repeating. It's the one, the only, the awesome Austin Koenig. Good morning, Austin. How are you doing?
Hey, doing well, Sean. Doing well. Thanks again for great intros as always. No worries about the trip up. I mean, there's so many names at this point, I forget too. So
Hey, when you're when
don't worry
you're
about it.
when you're as seasoned a live journalist as I am, it's like I make more mistakes before noon than Bill O'Reilly has his entire career. So
There
wow.
we go.
I don't know if that's something to be proud of or not. Well, how was your week last week, Austin? I didn't see you in Philly. What the heck?
Yeah, yeah. You didn't see me. Sorry about that. I didn't make sure to plan my schedule to make sure we're always on together. It's almost like we see each other every week anyway.
That's true.
So
That's true.
we're lucky enough to do that. Um, Either way, it was a good week nonetheless. We had some economic data that printed last week that was able to send the 10-year over five periodically, very periodically, like where we hit five. We never really closed at plus five, and we even saw that this morning when Asia was trading and Europe too, but we've kind of come down to about 4.935 is where the 10-year sits right now. So
Nice.
still a little bit worse than Friday's close, but it's definitely made into some improvements overnight into the morning. So either way, it's been a lot of Fed speak. There's also been a lot of economic data that's printed, and we can kind of get right into it. And we have another big week ahead of us. October's been a pretty headline grabbing month, I would say.
Yeah. All right. Well, tell us about last week. I know we had, we always have initial jobless claims. We had the consumer spending, and all signs point to a healthy economy with some spendthrift consumers. They're willing to spend a buck to get what they want.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We saw retail sales surprise. Consumers are still, spending at the end of the day, and it kind of matches the pace of price inflation. So it's almost like we're still spending the exact amount of like goods. It's
We're
just
getting
kind of
the, we're getting the
matching,
same amount of stuff.
getting the same amount of stuff, even though it costs more at the checkout line at the end of the day. So it seems like the consumer's still being resilient in terms of that. We saw, one print that kind of had a negative, economic growth connotation with it, which is obviously typically positive for rates, was the Philly Fed business outlook. This is something that's not necessarily a market driver typically. We kind of talk about initial jobless claims, how that was never like a banner print every time that came out on Thursdays, right? That's not what all Wall Street stops for until more so recently, and kind of this new normal of, hey, we need to see weakness in the labor market. Initial jobless claim does not really show any major weakness. In fact, it was a little bit better than expected, but the Philly Fed outlook showed that businesses are a little bit concerned about the economic outlook, which is, it doesn't really match up with how they see, sales right now, but I think it's more of a forward-looking, survey necessarily. So it's something that the Fed needs to, also adhere to, but at the same time, they kind of, work with the data they got. And those are some of the kind of the big headline items I would say that came out last week. But this week we have the first GDP print for Q3. We have core PC as well at the end of the week on Friday. And new home sales is another one that we will, especially us in the mortgage world, will pay attention to. That comes out on Wednesday. So nothing really today other than, the chance for some Fed speakers to speak. They have a meeting at the end of the month. I think November 1st is when they actually share their revelations on if they're going to hike or not on November 1st. So that's kind of,
Yep.
they'll have a quiet period, yeah, as we get closer to that date. So I don't think they'll actually be able to talk too much on core PCE by any means, but it is what it is. We have a good amount of data before we get that that decision, and we'll continue to see how that goes.
Yeah. So yeah, we got, like you said, GDP coming up. Is GDP like when that that number comes out? Is that like important for? I mean, obviously, like it's going to show the relative health of the United States economy. It's kind of backwards looking, but not too far, right? In Q3.
Yeah, it's that's actually a great question. This kind of poses a question to the market too of like how much have we been tallying up the scoreboard a little bit? Because in a way you kind of get the components of GDP spit out to you every month in like
Hmm.
piece by pieces, right? So you kind of get, let's think about what months are in Q3, right? We ended September, but we also had August and July, within those months. So, think about July. July seems like a long time ago. We're wearing
Sure does.
sweaters and coats now, so it's at the end of the day, it feels like a while back, and the market gets all these sort of tidbits, kind of like breadcrumbs along the way to kind of say, all right, well, this is what we're kind of expecting for GDP. GDP shouldn't be a huge surprise
Hmm. Hmm.
necessarily. And really, if it's not a big surprise compared to expectations, it really shouldn't move the market too much outside of maybe just continued grasp at like, hey, this is there's some moves or just there's a reaction to it just because it is an important number. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be it's still going to move markets a little bit, but if everyone's been paying attention, they shouldn't be too surprised, what's printed necessarily. Or I think it's just only if there's a major surprise, and a major surprise should kind of make you scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying there. It's like we've already got the data. We just kind of put it in the Excel spreadsheet and get it out. And we got PCE coming out Friday, so that's one of my favorites. And
You and Jerome.
well, I mean, it also always seems to like point some somewhat more muted picture than CPI is like, well, plus zero point 0.7, minus 0.6. It's like, oh, it kind of freaks out. PCE is like much more range bound to smaller numbers. Makes me feel calm during this topsy turvy market we're in. But at this point, the like PC is the last real inflation measure we get before next week's Fed meeting next next week, right? Yeah, next week, like you said,
Correct.
Wednesday. And the what's the consensus on what the Fed's going to do next week? I mean, it's like hold steady, right? There's no other option.
Yeah, and so there's been a lot of comments by the Fed, and I think the one thing the market especially paid attention to is there's not like when we got the Fed meeting minutes released, there's a little bit more, disagreement on the hike crowd versus, keep it steady and let the rate market kind of do its own damage necessarily in terms of, bonds bonds that are trading out in the market, U.S. Treasuries, right? The yields are going up without the Fed necessarily needing to do much. And so, is another hike necessary or not? A lot of people are arguing that it's possibly not, just by you know, what the rate market's doing at the end
Mhm.
of the day. And I think at the end of the day, there's obviously still inflation. The Fed has commented on it. But how much do they need to hike? Is a 25 bips hike really going to be something that's necessary? I think it's still like kind of a 50-50 shot for a lot of people, the way they look at it, for a hike to be done by the end of the year. So I would say I would not feel 100% convicted either way, but I would say if I had to predict anything, it's probably keeping it steady. But I don't know, like the comments at the end of the day by what the Fed says is a lot of eliminating factors, and I think they've already said everything they're going to say probably in their press conference. It's the rate market's kind of doing the job for us. There's restrictive policy. We want to continue to keep it restrictive. I think everything has to do with more so where do we see ourselves in June of next year. I think that's kind of the game that we're playing a little bit now, and no one can really say for sure. But the more the Fed talks, the more it sounds like it's going to be higher for longer. So that just means, hey, we don't need to necessarily hike more. We just need to not cut unless we
Sure.
absolutely need to.
Yeah, which is ultimately good news for us, right? It doesn't really matter like rates at 3, 5, 8, right? Like for your average loan officer and consumer, it's not like it's more about the direction rates are going and how quickly they're going there that seems to really like stick in the minds rather than like, I mean, a year from now, if rates are still at 8%, like if you want a house, you better get used to it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think like what a lot of my LOs are struggling with is like, well, I quoted them at 6.5 in July and then 7.5 in September and now, 8 and an eighth like right now. And it's like the consumer, reasonably, it concludes like it's getting more expensive. And I think that is like it's the getting more expensive part, not is expensive part that is really like troubles a lot of people. And again, like I remind folks, like the reason rates are high is because people are making too much money. They like the Fed's trying to cool a hot economy, and people are employed, they're overemployed, they're making more money than they ever have, and they're spending more money than they ever have. So it's like the only reason rates are high is because like things are a lot of the indicators are really really positive for your average person, right? Like, and how many people do you know that are out there searching right in just like your normal circle that are like searching for a job or that are like unhappy or worried about right well, the mortgage industry uh aside, like worried about like job security or anything. Everybody like the worker has all the leverage right now, which is great. And it means that like, yeah, it sucks that an 8% rate exists, but like more people than ever qualify for a mortgage. So there's still plenty of room out there. And the good news for us is like, there's like there's half as many homes being sold, but there's also half as many loan officers representing buyers. So we're in a great position to really consolidate like our leverage on the market and have an outsize like effect on our local markets. And then when things like assuming rates do drop sometime in the next year or two, right? Like it's gonna be a super fun ride down. But like really making sure that you're getting doing enough work to get enough deals in to make it through is the name of the game here. But as we've seen, another month at 8% rates, buyers are going to be like, oh, I guess that's just normal. And then 3 months later, they're going to be like totally fine with it. So, uh, is that what you've seen that like as we level up in rate, it just takes time for the consumer to catch up until they're finally like, nah, all right, I'll take it.
I think so, and it's not only the consumer; it's really actually the secondary market too. To be perfectly honest with you, Sean, so it actually rings true for both sides of the coin here.
That makes sense.
So it's tricky. Yeah, like the kind of anecdote right there of talking about pre-approving someone at 6.5, then 7.5. It is kind of a painful way up, but at the same time, once you have this rate environment where you stay at for a while, it's good for the secondary market. It's also good for the consumer because it's a kind of a consistent experience. You know what you're getting into in terms of a price standpoint, right? Price of financing the home, and you kind of are used to that, and you understand where your budget goes, what you're comfortable with, and all the good stuff. When the rates are jumping up, like it's like depends on when you call me. Literally on Monday or Friday, things can be two different worlds in the world we've been in recently. So it's that becomes difficult, no question. But I think it's when we have a kind of a steady Eddie rate environment, maybe a little bit of improvement, but nothing too volatile. I think everyone really benefits from that. So that's hopefully what we get, especially as we end this year and go into the beginning of next year, so we can kind of have a steady winter, purchase market.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for as well. And like, it's not all doom and gloom out there. Yeah, our loan
Mhm.
officers and agent director having, some are having the quarters and years of their lives in terms of production because they've 10x their activity and they're, yeah, it sucks. Like there's half as much volume out there, so they're only 5xing their their production, but like that's still huge, right? That's a big win. So uh plenty of business out there to be optimistic about. Austin, I'm excited about interpreting and digesting some of this data as it comes in with you this week
Yep.
for another show next week. Thanks for hopping on today.
Of course, it's great to talk to you as always, and everyone have a great week. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Have a great day, everybody.